way of life for them. So it really began as how they lived back on the farm. And when they came to the United States and they got together again with their relatives, they wanted to relive their history. And so they introduced the idea of a lot of traditional Italian, techniques of making sausage, supersata, making sauce in the summertime. Many different kinds of things, making wine, making ravioli, making pasta, making bread. And so that was our life when we grew up, was our parents basically trying to keep the history of what was their life real for us. And then what happened is, little by little, people at work started to hear about what we were doing on the weekend. Because our kids, and Christine, we remember doing this with our parents in the basement of our home. And they would say, "What'd you do this weekend?" "Well, we were in the basement and we made supersata." And they would be like, "What? What do you mean make supersata?" And then people at work were like, "Well, I remember my grandmother or my great-grandmother doing that." And they go, "Do you mind if I come and see?" And so they started to come to the basement. And then little by little outgrew the basement. It just became too crowded. And then we started to get to bigger and bigger places, and the word spread even more. And now we're about 26 years later, where we started doing this with friends and family from work, and now we have 20 families plus doing this every year, the same day, Saturday, the day before Super Bowl Sunday. And it's been an unbelievable pleasure to watch how what was a very nuclear kind of tradition now explode to being a tradition amongst many other nuclear families. And they talk about it, and they bring their kids, and they bring their children, and their friends, and their family. In fact, you brought friends today.
That's right.
So it spreads. It's like someone tells somebody and they tell two people and they tell two people. And it's great because we're keeping a tradition alive that started thousands of years ago.
Yeah, this truly means everything to us. I mean, you think about the way culture changes when a family moves from a country like Italy to the US, and generation after generation, some of the old cultural traditions can get lost and diluted and completely disappear if they aren't carried on. Obviously, my grandmother and grandfather, for them it was their everyday lives. It was how they grew up, it was how they survived, this is what they ate on a day-to-day basis. It was everything to them. That was just their normal way of life. And then for my father, it was his family, his parents, and how they expressed their love to him, and he has a very direct connection to that, But for us, this is really our way of connecting back to our roots, who we are as people, who we are as Italians. And I think that, for us, this is almost like how we form our identity. Because, in our day-to-day lives as American people, he's a doctor, he's a teacher, I'm a student, these things don't factor in unless you make time for them and that you find a way to introduce them on a day-to-day basis. So this is all big for us.
So here we are with the DiCapua family and friends at the Otis Tiffany Barnes Camp Cabin in Westchester, New York, where over 75 people have gathered to celebrate their Italian heritage by making traditional homemade Italian meat specialties such as sopressata, salsiccia, and bracciola. Out in the back, the specialty pig roaster is being fired up for tonight's big meal, which will also include meatballs, pasta, bracciola, and a specialty bread brought all the way from Greenwich Village. Breakfast and lunch are also served, and there's plenty of wine to share later on. But of course, someone has to check the quality before it's served. The preparations begin with expert knife sharpening. For over 1,500 pounds of meat will be cut, trimmed, and prepared this day. I've never before seen a knife sharpened so precisely as this. The meat is weighed according to the recipe. Families can purchase a full share of the day's products, which equals 30 pounds of meat, or any fraction of that. After weighing and portioning, the meat is brought to the tables and trimmed of all excess fat. For bracciola, it's sliced into fillets and hammered to make it extra thin and tender. Then the fillet is rolled with the other ingredients into a compact rollatini of delicious flavor. For sausage, the pork is cut into chunks. Parsley is finely diced, and the sausage chunks are ground up. The ground pork is added to the parsley and seasonings and thoroughly mixed by hand. Meanwhile, the pig is being prepared and spitted for the roaster. He's seasoned and stuffed, and then expertly sewn up. The seasoned sausage meat is fed into a special device that injects the meat into the casing, which is made from pig intestine. 3 different types of sausage are made. As this day is devoted to maintaining tradition, the young ones watch and learn. Then, it's Junior's turn with the careful help of his teacher. Even with all this work going on, there's plenty of time to socialize with family and friends. One side of the hall is set for dinner and the other meals, and participants use that area throughout the day to take breaks and chat. New friendships are made and old ones are renewed. And for John and Christine DiCapua, this day has been another chance for them and their loved ones and friends to grow closer together, remembering the most important Italian tradition of all, loving your family. A special thanks to Mr. Joe Andrews and his grandson, who filmed this event especially for Italian America Long Island.
Every day, the Italian flag flies 2,000 miles north of Italy on the remote island of Lamb Home, Orkney, off the northern coast of Scotland. There are many places in the world where one would expect to find an Italian chapel. The uninhabited island of Lamb Home in northernmost Scotland is not one of them. What makes this chapel so interesting is the fascinating story of its creation by Italian prisoners of war during World War II. The Italian chapel, known as the Miracle of Camp 60, is an example of ingenuity and spirit, forging a monument to faith using the barest of materials and the greatest of talent. The story begins in 1939 at the onset of World War II in Europe, when a German submarine infiltrated the safe haven for the British Navy in Orkney and sank the battleship the Royal Oak with a loss of 833 men. Recognizing that the waterways between the Orkney Islands posed a danger to the safe harbor, Winston Churchill devised a plan to prevent any further infiltration by building roads on causeways to connect the islands. In 1942, hundreds of Italian soldiers who were captured in North Africa by the British were sent to the remote Scottish island of Orkney as prisoners of war. The construction work that had been started by Irish laborers was completed by Italian prisoners. The Churchill barriers, constructed of 66,000 blocks of concrete, are still in use today, and provide the base for roads connecting the islands of Orkney. Although the British were considerate of the Italian prisoners of war, life in the camp was hard. The prisoners worked 6 days a week, and the constant rain made the ground extremely muddy. There was also a language problem. Some of the prisoners spoke limited English, and the guards had some extreme local English accents, making communication difficult. The prisoners devised ways to remind themselves of home. They built pathways surrounded by flowers between the buildings, made a makeshift theater and had performances, played musical instruments, published a Sunday newspaper, and when time permitted, made small trinkets to sell to the locals. The very first manifestation of creativity among the prisoners came in the form of a statue of Saint George on horseback. Domenico Chiocchetti, an artist and leader in the camp, made a barbed wire frame and covered it with cement. Saint George, the patron saint of England, killing the dragon, was a gift from the Italian prisoners. This statue is located in what is now the parking lot of the chapel. Inside the base of the statue is a roll with all the prisoners' names and some Italian coins. 2 prisoners, along with the Italian chaplain Father Giacobazzi and Domenico Chiocchetti, persuaded Major Buckland to let them build a chapel. 2 Nissen huts were joined together to form the structure of the chapel. Plaster and plasterboard were used on the interior to conceal the iron frame of the huts. The sanctuary was the first section to be completed. A focal point of the sanctuary is a painting of the Madonna and Child by Domenico Chiocchetti. The picture was on a prayer card that he had with him throughout the war. The painted windows on each side of the Madonna and Child mural depict St. Francis of Assisi and St. Catherine of Siena. The curved vaulted ceiling is adorned with life-size paintings of angels, representations of the 4 evangelists, and a dove symbolizing the Holy Spirit. The altar, altar rail, and stoop were molded in concrete, and one would think they were made of marble. Salvaged wood obtained from a wrecked ship was used for the tabernacle. The candlesticks were made from salvaged iron and brass. The magnificent, intricate iron gates and screen were designed and forged by a blacksmith who had been a wrought iron worker in America. It took him 4 months to complete the project, using only scrap metal. Once the sanctuary had been completed, Chiocchetti looked toward finishing the remainder of the interior. It was his plan to paint the walls to resemble bricks and stone. Plaster and plasterboard were used to cover the metal hut and to provide a smooth surface for the artwork. The ceiling lamps were made from discarded food tins. With such a beautiful interior, it was evident that work needed to be moved outdoors for the exterior. A view of the back entrance to the sanctuary provides a good picture of what the chapel looked like before the facade was completed. The cement workers created a beautiful arched facade supported by cement pillars to hide the metal structure. Windows were inserted for light, and a cardboard bell was added to the belfry until an iron bell could be obtained. The face of Jesus on the front of the chapel was made of clay. The original iron cross, which rusted over the years, has been replaced with an exact replica made of bronze. Lastly, the entire exterior of the structure was coated in thick layers of cement to preserve it from the elements. All of this was fabricated with little in the way of materials and much in artistry and ingenuity. It is hard to comprehend how something so beautiful could have been constructed by men having so little with which to work. Perhaps the answer is in the words of former POW Bruno Volpi, who returned to Orkney in 1992. People cannot be judged by their precarious situations. Their culture, spirit, and will to express themselves in creative thoughts and deeds are stronger than any limitation to freedom. This is the spirit that gave birth to the works of art on Lamb Home.
The Garibaldi Meucci Museum on Staten Island, New York, has been an historic house since 1843 and owned by the National Order Sons of Italy in America since 1919. Today, a Board of Commissioners of the New York State Grand Lodge of the Order administers its day-to-day activities. Welcome now to a virtual tour of the famed Garibaldi Meucci Museum, where the spirit of two great men enlivens one. As one takes the tour, one sees some of the many artifacts and exhibits displayed at the museum. Join us now on a tour of one of the jewels of the OSIA. The Garibaldi Meucci Museum was the home of General Giuseppe Garibaldi from 1851 to 53, who once unified Italy, and Antonio Meucci, the true inventor of the telephone. One cannot help but note the beautiful grounds where the gravesite of Antonio Meucci and his wife Esther are located. While Meucci's remains were placed beneath the monument, in 1989 Esther's neglected gravesite was found at Woodland Cemetery on Victory Boulevard on Staten Island. She was disinterred and reburied in the front yard of the museum. The rear area of the grounds is where Antonio Meucci made candles, which was his main source of income at that time. Today, a beautiful commemorative brick walkway that now has raised close to $250,000 leads to the entrance of the museum. In 2011, the brick program began as a fundraiser to which many responded. Individuals, friends of the museum, and OSIA lodges can purchase a brick to memorialize a loved one, to honor a person for all their achievements, or for a memorable event. Upon entering the museum, one views the Antonio Meucci room on the right, with documents attesting to the fact that he was and is the true inventor of the telephone, along with photos and other artifacts. A photo of Meucci evidences a grand picture of the inventor, who developed a form of voice communication apparatus in 1857. This is the prototype of the telephone initially created by Meucci. Similarly, a death mask brought about at the time of his death shows a man who weathered the hard times of his fight for his inventions. Antonio Meucci is seen here at the Hotel Caprera, which was located across the street at the corner of Tompkins and Chestnut Avenues on Staten Island. The rocker and piano you see are works by Antonio Meucci that have been recovered over the years and show his creativity in any variety of ways, including woodwork. The Garibaldi room on the left side of the museum entrance evidences exhibits and many photos showing the history as to how Italy was liberated. The bust of Giuseppe Garibaldi with photos of his related battles brings one closer to the life of the hero once sought after by Abraham Lincoln. Giuseppe Garibaldi led many of the military campaigns that brought about the formation of a unified Italy. He is called the hero of two worlds, in tribute to his military expeditions in South America and Europe. Viewing the swords and the map of his conquest brings one to the tremendous impact he had on international history. The intense Battle of Bizecca in Austria during the War of 1866 was noteworthy, as are pieces of the past. His hat and memoirs, along with display of several of his red shirts, are the few remaining pieces that have survived. One sees the many medals he won in his several battles throughout his career. In a photo of Giuseppe Garibaldi with his third wife, Francesca Armosino, from 1880 until his death in 1882, we note the strong relationship he had at that time. He had 6 children, 5 daughters, and 1 son. Another photo of his daughter, Clelia, survives today, showing his staunch family spirit. Upon entering the famed Garibaldi bedroom on the 2nd floor of the museum, one sees his bed with more rifles, swords, and another red shirt, along with his desk where he wrote many letters and his memoirs. The museum today is the site of many heritage and cultural activities, ones that include community organization meetings, lectures, Italian classes, opera classes, and other presentations. The elected Board of Commissioners, Directors of the New York State Grand Lodge convenes quarterly for meetings in which one notes they are busy at work. Students of all ages enjoy the Italian classes, and here we note lecturer Lou Barella conducting an opera series class. One of the more recent presentations was the Americordo, a book review and the story of Italian Jews in exile in America, a most successful event and one that had a standing room crowd of 75 people. Annually, there are memorial celebrations for Antonio Meucci's birthday at his gravesite on the beautiful grounds. Another recent and most successful event was the Antonio Meucci Young Inventors Contest, held at the Staten Island Tech High School, where some 400 applied for the competition. The students presented their inventions as the parents and teachers showed pride in their achievements. Yes, we hope you've enjoyed this very brief tour and presentation, and with a sense of pride we look forward for your visit in person and the tour at the Garibaldi Meucci Museum, for indeed the history of 2 great men, Giuseppe Garibaldi and Antonio Meucci, lives on today. Thank you.